Now 6:32. We'll call March 31, 2020 Board of Selectmen meeting to order. Pardon? Oh, I'm on TV too. I guess we're on YouTube. Great. We'll show everybody how inept we are about this. But anyway, so we begin with, I guess, let me see. Town administration, let's see, announce, welcome, and just call to order. We don't have any public input since there's nobody in the room other than us.
Depends on what room you're talking about.
Well, can I ask a question about that? Could someone chat if they wanted to have public input? I guess that's a question for the administrator. That's a technical question. And then it's do we want to allow that at this point?
I don't know.
Well, if somebody has a question, they probably can just go in the chat function and just say that they have a question, and then we can recognize it that they have a question.
Okay.
That sounds right.
I think in the future, though, for these virtual meetings, if we want public input, we should ask people to ask their question one way or another, through email or whatever, so we would have the person and their questions all teed up for the public input, as opposed to trying to manage this at this, like we're doing it right now. No? Yes?
Yes.
Sure.
Yeah, I know I'm staticky. I'm not going to get staticky. All right. Announcements. For more information, visit wenham.gov. Let's see what announcements we have here.
There's no announcements, Jack. We're just looking right.
No wonder why I can't find any. Okay. Okay. The next agenda item is
We can go right to new business on A, unless the selection has a report. My report's inside the item letter D on the new business. So unless the selection has something, we can go right to A.
Oh, I do.
Okay.
Oh, I do. I have a comment, and that I'm sorry that I can hear myself on my cell phone, the feedback, but I'm very, very worried about the town's finances, in that I think that we should have a meeting once a week, I guess virtually from now on, until Governor Baker says we can meet physically with each other, and that I think we have to worry about money in the budget. I think that we're alerting people, including about washing hands, to social distancing, blah, blah. You get that from Charlie Baker. Everyone in the world is saying the same thing, so there's nothing else I think we can share with, although we have to Mary Beth Ting tonight to tell us whatever she's going to tell us. But the budget, what we're doing now, I think the people in Wenham who are furloughed particularly are going to be concerned about what are we doing to reduce expenses right now, and that to mitigate, any potential budget deficits. And what are we doing about I'll back up for a second. I think we need to review, again, the fiscal 2001 budget, proposed budget, that is. We don't have an approval for it. And that we put that budget together under business as usual conditions. We don't have business as usual. And so we have lots of expenditures. I think we might decide to delay and defer or eliminate next year, given the circumstances right now and the potential circumstances that we may be in this lockdown here for quite some time. So I'm not proposing we actually have a meeting tonight, not tonight, but I think that I want to work with Anthony and the Board of Selectmen to call a meeting to go over the budget again, inviting obviously the Finance and Advisory Committee in to review what we propose next year that we might want to now reconsider. So that's just a comment. What was that?
I think that
Is that my buzzer? The time is up. Is like the Gong Show or what?
I think that we may need some legal advice on our ability to change the budget now.
Well, we've never, well, the Board of Selectmen voted the budget.
Right.
We haven't proposed this to anyone else. Why can't we go back and change the budget before we actually submitted it?
Well, let me rephrase that comment. I agree with you, Jack. We need to be monitoring this, you know, everything as closely as we can. But there's a lot of legislative stuff about changing town meetings that's in process. So I'm just asking that we be kept up to date with that as we go along with any changes we might be wanting to make.
Good question. Good point.
Yeah, we can ask, but, you know, so the Board of Selectmen have voted a certain budget, but we can always meet again and vote a different budget. So because we haven't submitted this to the town for consideration, we haven't distributed the warrant books, et cetera, so that I don't see any reason why we can't meet again and change, review it. Certainly, we can review it. We don't need anybody's permission to review it. And I suppose if we want to make a change, I don't see any reason why the Board of Selectmen can't make a change to the previously approved Board of Selectmen budget between now and the time we actually issue the warrant. But we can ask for legal advice on that.
Yeah, only because I believe that I read somewhere in one of these statutes that people are writing, bills, I guess, that if we can change the date and the election, the town meetings under certain circumstances, but I thought it said something about using the materials that already existed. That's the only reason I asked the question, and it might be meaningless. We just need to double check with it.
Okay, we can do that. Anyway, my two fellow selectmen in agreement, we should go back and review if it's legally permissible, the proposed fiscal 2021 budget that we haven't yet issued to the town.
I would ask for some advice from Anthony and Jackie on that, if this is the right, if it's too soon to do that, if we have enough information yet to propose changes, or if we have to change again. That's, you know, I get the need for reviewing it.
A review does not necessarily mean any new votes. It just means we're going to review it.
I think Anthony wants to say something, Jack. Can you see that?
Yeah, I'd like to hear John Clementi's answer before I hear Anthony's. I'm asking the two other selectmen what they think of what I just proposed. I haven't heard from John yet.
Okay, I agree that we should review the budget. The one question I have is, has the warrant been printed yet?
Well, it might have been printed, but it hasn't been distributed.
Correct. Okay, so either way, I do believe it would be very appropriate to review what we've done and match it to what we're into at this point and where we may be going, because we're in uncharted territory.
So, Catherine, I'm sorry, Anthony, Catherine indicated you had something to add.
No, I just asked if he did. You know, that's all. And I don't know that he does. I'm just saying, is this the right time? Do we wait until after, you know, May 1st when the taxes are due? You know, do you have enough information to be able to inform us to do anything substantive, or, you know, to actually start reviewing at this point? I guess is my question for Anthony.
Before Anthony answers, you know, one of these days, next week, the week after, a month from now, 6 weeks from now, Charlie Baker said, okay, you can now have public meetings and go back to normal, whatever normal is at the time, and that we have a very tight time schedule from then on to basically set dates for the elections, the annual town meeting, et cetera, and we better have, if we're going to do that, we're going to be in a hell of a crunch if we decide to have then schedule a meeting of the Board of Selectmen to review the budget, which might take a couple of meetings. So we better be all set, in my opinion, about what we think we might want to do, depending on how long this crisis lasts. And so that I'm simply suggesting that we schedule meetings to say, if indeed it's as bad as it looks like, we don't look at TV and you know, hear the prognostications about how long it's going to last, at least another month, could be till July, who knows, and that what would be changed if indeed the course of this shutdown is as long as people are projecting. And we can just discuss this, and that we can always decide that, okay, well, we want to hold off right now, but here are some things that we think we could defer until the following year. And that, but I don't think we can do all this and at the same time as scheduling all these other meetings we have to truncate, presumably before July 1, but maybe after July 1, that's all.
Can Anthony answer my question now, please?
Anthony?
So I think what I heard so far, Jack, is that weekly board meetings, and it probably would be a good idea for first item on the agenda, it being budget updates. We can certainly put FY20, and then we can start some discussions on FY21 in the event that we get some news. All the calls that I've been on right now is all different administrators and managers, mayors across the Commonwealth that are asking, how is this going to affect state aid? And it's all silent right now. And we were even on with the Lieutenant Governor today. So, but I think it makes sense to discuss and have it on the agenda, FY20 and FY21 every week. And certainly, if we need to go back and change something for FY21, we just probably have to just vote to reopen the warrant, make any changes, close the warrant, and go from there.
Frankly, I would agree very strongly with what you just said, Anthony. In addition, we've also got a third player in the loop, and that is the Hamilton Wenham Regional School District. And I'm sure they're going to have to review their budget because they've got a whole bigger mess than we do.
54% of our budget, so yeah, it's a lot of money. Catherine, did Anthony just answer your question?
Not exactly, but it's okay.
Well, as far as FY20, Catherine, you're asking about that as far as changing any of the numbers. Yes, we don't have, to your point, which I think you were saying is, we have no data right now that that tells us, we're not a community that has a lot of receipts as a result of meals tax or room occupancy tax. Actually, we haven't adopted those, so, and even if we did, it would be very minor. So the only thing that we have coming from the state is just state aid. So with that, we don't get a lot. So our net state aid is about $250,000. So we're only looking at 1 quarter. So even if the governor did decide to slash local state aid for this last quarter, it wouldn't be a big significant amount to Wenham that it would be like, to say, Beverly. But other concerns that we have is we do have other local receipts that we need to continue to monitor, which we are having finance monitor, and that being permits. And we know some rents at the Iron Rail.
Right.
We notified that a tenant, 2, actually has some issues with making the rent payments. So we are actually trying to do some research and see what could be available to those businesses. And I actually just assigned that to Margaret Hoffman and sent her an email tonight. So there's things that we need to continuously monitor for FY20. So I don't know if that answers your question. And certainly the real estate taxes, we have to see how that goes.
Well, that's what I was saying about. So I guess my point, and then I'll be quiet about this, is anything that we discuss that's really kind of theoretical at this point just has potential for upsetting people when it's just theoretical. But if we're monitoring, say, budget versus actual, and we have some substantive differences, as soon as we see that, we can start talking about it. And I said May 1st because that's when our tax bills are due. I mean, right now, other than some rent that we're not getting, assuming we get our state aid, for FY20, the bigger problem is going to be FY21. And for FY20, we don't really know until we know what our revenues are, because we're kind of late in the year. That's all I was saying. I have no problem with a discussion. I just don't want to start, I don't want to alarm people when it's, until it's necessary. Let's put it that way.
Well, we have to plan, and that I'm not really worried about state aid or whatever. It's going to be que sera, sera. It's going to be whatever it is, it is. It's going to be the same as we projected or less, probably not more. But I'm worried about the fact there's a lot of people in town are losing their jobs or have already lost their jobs. And we have two large overrides that we're proposing next year. One for the schools, over $750,000, and one for the town, over $360,000. So that's a lot of money, and that a lot of people are feeling a lot different now about how much they want to pay in taxes. And now that they've lost their jobs, and they may not come back. That's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the state aid going down 10%, 5%, whatever. I think we need to start talking about that, because it looks like it's if we're going to be we're not going to be able to get back to normal by at least June, no earlier than June. If people don't have the same money they had before when we were discussing the budget. I think we need to simply discuss what in the budget is really, really important, and do we have a different opinion about what we'd be proposing at town meeting when it eventually gets rescheduled than we did 2 months ago when we did this. That's all I'm suggesting.
So you're talking about having these discussions relative to FY21 and how we might want to change that?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, I got it. Thank you.
It's good for me, too.
Yeah, we also have fiscal 2020, that's another discussion, but Anthony is making, we have, what are people doing now trying to mitigate the expenses for this year? And that's an ongoing process, and we can talk about that as well. We haven't furloughed anybody. Most towns haven't. There's a lot of, we had a discussion last week about this, but I think that's an ongoing discussion that I think we need to bring up, and that I think some of the department heads have some ideas, particularly the larger ones, but we can hear back from them of what they're thinking about. But my comments a minute ago were really directed to the fiscal 2001 budget process.
Okay.
All right, so we're gonna, let's see, I'm looking at my other laptop here. God, you tell me I've lost it already. All right, here we go.
Well, if you're all set, Jack, we've got appointments after that.
I'm on it right now, John.
Okay.
We have, yeah, I'm looking at my,
Do you want me to move on the appointments?
please, John.
Okay. We
Is that
have,
assigned to you? Yeah, okay.
yeah, yes, it is.
Yeah,
We have-
new business appointments. JC, that's you, right, go ahead.
Okay. I'll read the motion first. I move that the Board of Selectmen appoint Diane K. Bucco and Ronnie H. Hillard as Board of Registrars for the term beginning April 1, 2020, and ending March 31st, 2023.
I'll second that. I'll second it. Catherine seconds it.
All in favor, John?
Aye.
Aye?
Catherine, aye.
Okay, that's 3 ayes. Congratulations. By the way, I think Mr. Ebling would prefer his name is Hilly. That's his nickname everyone uses.
That's right.
It did take me a few minutes to figure out who we were appointing there for a second.
Okay.
Thank you, Hilly. Okay, next we have the intermunicipal agreement with the town of Hamilton shared fuel station. That's my agenda item, and I'll turn it back over to Anthony. He's the one to negotiate all this. We have a lot of material in our package, so, but go ahead, Anthony. You can describe this for the other selectmen.
Sure. Thanks, Jack. So what we have here is the town of Hamilton is going to be taking up their fuel tanks with possibly doing the renovations at Town Hall. Besides that fuel tank that they have needs to be replaced. And actually, our fuel tanks at our DPW yard need to be replaced as well. So each, for us to do it, would cost anywhere between $250,000 and $300,000, and it would cost Hamilton the same, $250,000 to $300,000. So what this agreement is really a test to see if we could coexist in the same location. So if we could, then we could save the taxpayers of each community half that amount. So Wenham would only need to pay between $125 and say $150 for the fuel tanks, for the fuel system. So this would start, see how it goes, and then we report back, and hopefully it would work.
Sounds good.
Questions?
I have no questions.
John, do you have any questions?
I do.
Fire away, fire away.
How do we monitor honesty in the consumption of the fuel from Wenham to Hamilton? And the reason I say that is because if you're doing it exclusively Wenham today, we don't know what Hamilton usage is, and we have no way of telling whether they're filling a small truck, big truck, or personal truck for whatever that value is.
So every user of our fuel system gets a key, and that key is assigned to an individual. So we would be issuing them keys, and it would tell the consumption for the usage based on them utilizing our pumps. So it's all digital. So it's not like they just go in and say, oh yeah, we did $20 today. No, it's all computerized, and Bill gets a report. You'd be able to say right to the gallon how much Hamilton uses.
So you're saying that we have that capability today, and that's how we function on our own?
Yes.
The reason I say that is because I've been monitoring a scanner for some time now, and I hear the fuel filling going on, and there's a verbal reporting of gallonage and identification. Are you sure the technology is in place?
That's what I'm told by Bill. I don't know if Bill or Eric is on. No, they're not. Bill, are you on?
Bill is watching from HW cam, so if folks have specific questions, he is listening and will text me the answers. He's having some connection issues.
Yeah, John, I'm 99% sure.
I would think so, but I'm just verifying, because once you make that move, then you've got two operations in there. The other is liability. Do we have adequate liability insurance coverage for both towns? Because if there's ever an issue, a problem, an explosion, an injury, we're into another field altogether.
Yeah, both towns have insurance that would cover that.
Okay. I guess that's my questions.
Right. So, let's see, do we have a motion to discuss? I move that we approve the intermunicipal agreement as proposed by Anthony and the shared fuel station in Wenham. We hear a second?
Second.
Okay.
Any, all in favor? Aye?
Catherine, yes.
John, yes.
Jack Wilhelm, yes. It's approved unanimously. Thank you, Anthony. Good job. Next, we have you're on, Catherine, for the MIA, Property Casualty and Workers' Compensation Renewal Proposal.
Yep, this is, I think, another punt to Anthony to, these look like rate increases for insurance that already exists. But if you'd like to explain that, Anthony, that'd be great.
Sure. This is just our annual renewal for our property, liability, and workers' comp policy. You always see it increase. Everything goes up. So the increase this year is 5.3 over last year, of which we have the opportunity, if we prepay by August 1st, we would get a 3% discount, which we do normally take advantage of that discount.
So, is that something, well, I guess this year we might have to weigh that, paying by August 1st, just because of our maybe cash flow situation. But my really only one question on that is, how did we budget? What's in the budget for that? Is it what is on here? In other words, have we budgeted the amount that these increases are, plus what they say is 10 to 15% additional?
I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I can look at that. Well,
I just wasn't sure what we were using to budget, but that was the only question I had.
I'll check.
Anthony, we budgeted $145,000 in the line for Maya for fiscal 21, up from 135,000 for fiscal 20.
So that should be fine.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Catherine, the motion is still with you.
Well, okay. I thought you read it. Okay, so I move that the Board of Selectmen vote to approve the Maya insurance renewal for property, $53,096, liability, $20,272, and workers' compensation coverage, $27,043 for FY21.
I second that. That's the motion.
I have a question and concern. This is a very sizable bill. Given the environment that we're in, has this been shopped around, and with who and what comparatives did we get?
Maya is used by maybe every single city or town, unless they decide to be self-insured, of which they take that liability onto themselves. So this is the municipal insurance agency, and I can tell you that my experience is just by looking at our health plan when we tried to go private, and they came back with a 14.9%. If we were with Meyer, that would have probably came back between 5 and 6%.
Okay, so it has not been shopped around, is what you're saying, or not saying. I have managed that type of an expense for many years, and I've got to tell you, on an annual basis, I would shop around, and I've found some significant savings for my operation.
They handle our employee assistance. There's a lot more benefits that we get that no other insurance agency, without doing a tremendous amount of work, could even meet their needs, in my experience. I don't know of another community that does anything differently than what we're doing.
All right. Well, it's a concern, and I'm not sure why we wouldn't shop it around before we present it to the board.
Am I hearing that there are not really very many municipal options?
I know of none in my 17 years of doing this, but.
And you're saying private corporations have no interest or can't be competitive, or what are you saying?
I don't know. I can't answer that question. I don't know.
Well, $150,000 is a lot of money.
Well, we're currently paying, if I have this right,
Yes.
100,000-ish?
Yes.
I don't know anything other than what I read, and I've never done municipal business with other than Maya. They are founded by the MMA, and the purpose
Correct.
they were founded was to create cost stability for municipalities. So certainly they're a big player. I can't speak to anybody else.
You may be right, Anthony. I just have concern with something this sizable because I know that market, that insurance market, and it's driven not by the corporation itself, but it's driven by investments and loss factors that go on within the industry. And every year, that can be very different because there's been a significant loss in that particular industry, or gain or something like that.
So Anthony, when does the policy expire, the present one? Anthony?
The end of the fiscal year.
June 30th. So John, maybe we should go ahead and approve this tonight and ask Anthony to do the research you're actually suggesting we do. Is this a one-year deal, Anthony?
Yes.
John, my suggestion is we approve this tonight, and that we task Anthony. We're looking forward to other alternatives, and he begin a lot earlier next year to see if there are other alternatives that are less expensive and give us the same bang for the buck that this Maya policy is doing, so we can move forward.
I would go along with that, and I do have an individual who's been a player in my world that I can call and see what, and direct him towards you, Anthony, to see what he might have an interest in or be able to do.
And meanwhile, John, we're looking for your vote.
I'll go along with it.
I think Catherine already proposed it, and I already seconded it, and I think it's
Yes.
so
Yes.
it's unanimous approval of the Board of Selectmen to proceed as Anthony has stipulated and requested. Right? All right. This is more difficult doing this virtually than I thought. And that,
We'll get used to it. I think we're going to be doing it a lot.
yeah. So I'll have to check the audio next couple of days. So next one, item D, which is got 7 items. And that I see our Dr. Ting was on here. Oh, here he is. Yeah, he's still there. And that
as well.
Board of, and our public health minister, which is related to Dr. Ting. So go ahead, Dr. Ting, you're on. Dr. Ting?
Yeah, I'm here. Unmuting.
There we go.
So, I mean, as you know, that we are in the midst of the this COVID pandemic, and the town has been working very hard to keep it informed and as safe as possible. I know that we've done a lot of work on the board and made, as well as both in the town of Wenham and with our sister town in Hamilton for consistency regarding certain public health suggestions. And I know that Mary Beth, who's been in the weeds of being the public health nurse, can actually give us more detail about what's been going on, and we can go, and then we can ask her questions.
Mary Beth?
So the process of figuring out what's happening in town in terms of the infection uses a virtual epidemiologic network set up by the state. This has been around for quite some time. It's not brand new with this viral infection. This is something that I have been using for the past many years, where infectious diseases are reported by providers, by lab values to the town, so that the public health nurse will follow up and check with people with infection to follow contacts, case contacts, and to protect the public's health. And so that's what I've been doing over the past number of weeks, as well as, meeting and discussing policy issues with the school district, together with our colleagues in Hamilton, and trying to figure out what we can do best to inform, how best to inform the public of measures that they can take to be taking all the precautions they possibly can to avoid exposure. So we do have a number of cases in Wenham right now, and I am following those individuals to see how their illness is progressing or resolving, and figuring out who they've been in contact with, so who else is at risk and who needs to be in quarantine right now. And I check in with those individuals on a daily basis by electronic means, either by a phone call or an email or a text message, to check in on them, provide guidance, make sure they have all the supplies and things that they need to take care of themselves at home.
So, Mary Beth, how many cases do we have in Wenham who are
So
positive?
we have had 3 people test positive. We have had 1 individual who was advised by their healthcare provider, yes, you are most likely positive, treat yourself as if you are, who has not been tested. Of those 3, 2 have recovered and are no longer in isolation. And of those cases, there are a number of people who are household or close contacts who are in quarantine.
Thank you.
So, Mary Beth, first of all, thank you very much for all that you're doing, of many of us. I can only imagine your job has gotten a lot bigger in the past few weeks, so thank you for that. I don't know if now or another time in this meeting is the appropriate time to talk about how and what you would typically communicate to the public relative to that information.
Yeah. I was part of the job that I'm doing right now is staying current with all the information and guidance that's coming from the state. So even just today, there was a conference call with the Department of Public Health officials with local boards of health. And one of the things that came up in that discussion was a question of why is data reported by the state on a county level and not a municipal level? And the speaker for the Department of Public Health, the Assistant Commissioner, reported that this has been a long-standing way of reporting infectious disease by the Department of Public Health. And the rationale behind that is that we have many small municipalities in the Commonwealth. Ours is a fine example. And it has been left to each municipality to decide how and when and in what format they will share this information. And one of the concerns in a very small community is the spread of private health information. And so, you know, when you have a small municipality and you say we have this many cases, it's very possible for people to connect the dots on other individuals' private health information. And so we have to take that in mind when we're thinking about what kind of information we're going to disseminate and with what regularity.
So at what would you be comfortable with sharing the numbers perhaps on a weekly basis? Just numbers only?
Well, I think one of the questions we have to ask is what purpose does sharing the numbers provide? We know that the numbers are going to go up. That's expected. We're heading into a surge. And if it does not change what individual residents in the town need to do to protect themselves, whether it's 4 or 45 or 450, I'm not sure what that change in information provides, but I certainly would like the input of the board as well.
Well, if I could just clarify, and then I'll let other people. I guess the reason, my answer to that question is, there's so much uncertainty. I think people are interested to know that information, to understand maybe the magnitude of the problem, and to emphasize it in our town. Not necessarily people's names. I certainly understand the privacy issue, but I do think there's a call for. Obviously, there's a call for information, or why would even the state be, you know, putting it out daily? So that's just my thought. I'm going to be quiet now.
Excuse me, before we proceed, is there somebody who has the volume on their computer and on their phone? I can't see it in the participant survey, but we're getting some echoing. So if you're listening it to on a computer and a phone, try to mute one or the other so we don't have such a bad echo for the recording. Thank you.
This is Jack Wilhelm. I totally agree with Dr. Ting, Mary Beth Ting, and that I don't think publicizing the scorecard, how many infections, how many recovered, is really going to change. All of us have been indoctrinated every single day. We've got to wash our hands multiple times a day, don't touch knobs, social distancing. I think everyone in my neighborhood is doing exactly that. They're walking around, but they're staying 10 feet apart. And that I don't think the publication of that would induce anyone to do anything different than they're doing right now. And I think it would scare some people. A couple of my neighbors who are elderly, I think they would be scared if you even increased it by 1 tomorrow over what you just talked about now. And that obviously you can't let anybody know where the name of the person or the address, which is what most people probably want to know, is it my neighbor, is it a couple of streets down? So I agree with you. John, do you have a comment?
I have a comment and I have a question. My comment is, I want to thank God and you and Dr. Ting for being at the helm during this very, very difficult time. I have tremendous confidence in both of you to see us through this in a very professional and responsive way. So thank you so much. And I have heard through the grapevine, Mary Beth, that you have had an exhaustive schedule. So for those who think a lot of these folks are just sitting there taking notes, answering calls, it's not quite that simple. My question, Mary Beth, is sort of twofold. Do we have adequate equipment for our first responders, in your opinion? Have you been assessed of that, and do they have the adequate equipment, and is there more available if it's needed? And the second part to that question is the testing, the test kits. Do you or does the county have access to those test kits if we want or need those for some purpose?
Okay, so I will call attention to the fact that we have, I know we have fire on this call, fire and EMS. So I'm going to defer your question about the equipment to the chief and to Jeff Baxter, who are here, and I'll ask them to answer that question. I can say that we are going through the process. I will speak to this part. MEMA has made funds available, and we have already put in requests for funding to get the additional supplies that will be needed. What was the other question? Oh, testing equipment. That is not something that local boards of health, at least the Wenham Local Board of Health, is doing. That is being undertaken by hospitals and primary care providers. So that is not something that I anticipate that we will be accessing at this time. Anything I say is usually with the proviso, and I'm not trying to be coy about this, but at this time, because we've all heard ad nauseum that this is a rapidly evolving situation. So guidance changes sometimes hour by hour on some effects. You know, the governor makes a pronouncement and that changes certain things, and we have to adjust. I am seeing in the chat box that there was a comment from a resident that if the resident knew there were 50 cases, they would be more likely to be careful than it was 3 or 4. And I cannot stress strongly enough, the numbers that we have are based on testing availability. When more tests become available, we will know that there are more people infected in Wenham. So I am imploring all Wenham residents to take this very seriously and to stay at home, because you do not know who is infected. There are some people who are at the beginning of their course of illness who are not going to look ill, who could cause you to be infected. So stay home with your own family unless you have an urgent need to leave your home for provisions or for an urgent medical appointment. That's advice for everyone, and I can't state it strongly enough.
Thank you for your answer, and that's good. And if the chiefs can give us a response on the equipment, because my biggest concern is our first responders putting their presence out there on the line, like you do, or you would do if you were being called on to respond to a medical call. These folks are very precious to us.
As of right now, we have all the requests in through MEMA, through the state. The state will only allow you supplies for 7 days at a time. So we're constantly on the phone, myself and the chief, with different contacts throughout the state and suppliers. We've been able to procure a few different things as of right now, but as of today, both us and the police do have supplies to continue to march forward.
Okay, so you're not in need, but you don't have an overage of equipment.
No, we have enough to continue our call volume we've been doing, and a little bit above.
Oh, okay, all right. Well, that brings great comfort to me, because I know how important it is, because you guys don't have but a minute or two to respond to a call, and you don't know what you're going to be walking into.
Don't.
Thank you, Jeff.
So I need to circle back to communication because I'm not sure where we left off. So relative to numbers of cases in Wenham, are we saying, Board of Health and other selectmen, that we will not be communicating the numbers for Wenham to the public? that
Hi,
one?
it's Andrew.
Hi,
I
thanks.
think at this time, the communication that Alicia come out from the Board of Health and hopefully the town is to echo what Mary Beth said of the seriousness of this COVID pandemic. Whether we have, a couple of cases or we have tens of cases, everyone's being really on top of the recommendations that are given in terms of quarantining if possible, and hand washing and social distancing have to be kept at all times. And so I think my suggestion is that we continue to communicate that to the residents of Wenham, because as you know, as we go further into this pandemic, people will get a little bit lax. And like any child, you tell them to do something, and they'll do it for a while, and then they'll forget, and they'll start to reduce and taper off. And the best thing to do is just, hey, this is serious. As the governor had said already, it'll probably get worse before it starts to flatten off and get better. So we haven't yet hit that pinnacle of zenith yet that he's talked about. So again, I'm not sure if presenting a number as much as that there are cases in Wenham, and so we remind everyone to continue to be really on top of things.
And how would we remind them? This is just on the website? Is that what you're suggesting?
Well, one is we post up on the website on a regular basis, so that's always upkeep. There was a question about using the reverse 911 as a way to communicate, again, that, and maybe point towards either using the state's 211 line if you have questions. We tried it tonight. It works both with your cell phone or a landline, because I have both at home, as well as, obviously the Board of Health has their website, and the contact numbers for both Mary Beth is on there, and the Board of Health email there too. So we are meeting tomorrow night, and we will probably come up with some further recommendations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ting and Mary Beth, for that update, and that there are no further questions. I think we should go on to the next item on the agenda.
Jack, I'm sorry, butting in again, before these guys leave. So I heard something about the fact that Hamilton has changed, I think it's a change, some of its policies or procedures relative to parks and playgrounds. And can you give us an update on that, since we won't hear from you again until next week?
You're asking me to give you an update?
No,
on that?
I think Mary Beth and Dr. Ting were both at that meeting. Was a Board of Selectmen in Hamilton and a Board of Health meeting this week?
Yes, it was a joint meeting. I think qualified as a joint emergency meeting potentially. I'm not sure. They did, forgive me, I don't remember the exact language, but they did close all parks, playgrounds, courts. Anthony, can you remember what else was in that language?
Tennis courts, basketball courts, parks, playgrounds.
And they issued a reverse 911 call today and advised residents of such, and encouraged people to still go outside, and they made some recommendations to different trails in town, like the Greenbelt and Bradley Palmer.
Was that something that the Wenham Board of Health might be discussing tomorrow relative to, well, we don't have as much West Wenham Playground or whatever else we may have?
Okay.
Just curious about that.
Well,
Plus,
Kathy,
I know
let me
you
answer.
haven't met yet.
Let me butt in for a second. So that I've been walking a lot in the neighborhood lately, and that cars are, whether it's the trail, what do you call it, the rail trail?
Yeah.
And that people going down to Wenham Lake off of the Road 97 going to just before the Beverly line, or The other places that are nice in the woods, so Hamilton may be closing the parks, but people are definitely congregating in these recreational places. And that, so there's a lot of recreational places that aren't official in the town. Some are, even the Cedar Street walkways have been fairly crowded with people. My observation is that people are keeping the 6-foot distance even more, but there's a lot of places where people that now they're out of work and staying home in nice weather like today are walking around, and that I don't think there's anything wrong with that as long as they keep the distance.
Well, the input that I heard on the Wenham Rail Trail was that there were a lot of people, like maybe more than would be advised. And hasn't the Cedar Pond, Audubon, haven't they closed the trails by Cedar Pond? So this is the kind of information that I feel like people don't know, and I'm not sure who's the keeper of it or who should be communicating it, but we want people to go outside, I presume. We have limited places in Wenham, and I don't think people know. So, sorry, I may be asking the wrong people. I just don't know where.
No, I did share that information. I was asked at the Hamilton meeting last night if Wenham was planning to go along with the tenor or the tone or the sense of the direction they were going. And yesterday we had a meeting, Anthony and I and Public Safety were discussing concerns about the rail trail, mostly because of the, yes, it's very, very crowded with people, and that is concerning. The other concern is the parking that's happening along that area, and there are families getting out, onto 97 with their little kids with bikes, and there was some real concern expressed around safety as far as that goes.
Well, that's a year-round problem, though. Mm-hmm. People parking there, the bikes, the kids going across. Yeah. That's not. So that's a year-round, and particularly in the summer. So anyway.
But having that come right on the heels of the fatal bicycle accident in Topsfield, that was brought up as a real concern. And
yeah, it is a concern.
And with people desperate to get out and get some fresh air, but if they're all showing up at the same time, then the physical distancing becomes a challenge.
We actually expanded the parking in that area a few years ago, and it still is overwhelmed because it is a very popular trail, both towards Danvers and towards Topsfield.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess, Catherine, the question, I think that the Board of Health will have some discussion about these things tomorrow as well as other things. And that, back to your concern, though, is not necessarily whether we keep the parks open or closed, is more so communication to the citizens of Wenham in a very succinct way so that people aren't confused or unaware of what is going on. And so I think that is definitely something to be discussed.
Thank you. You just said it way more eloquently than I did, obviously. Thank you for that. And I'm going to presume from a procedural point of view here that the Board of Health has the authority to just vote those changes without, or do we have to come back and vote any recommendations or changes that you vote? I guess I don't know for that either.
I would have to ask Jackie about that.
I have the answer. Anthony, what's the answer?
I think it's both.
Mr. Town Administrator.
I think it's both. I think the Board of Health will make a decision, and the Selectmen would concur on that.
Concur or approve?
Either, whatever. Approve or concur, I should say.
There you go.
Yeah.
I guess.
Okay. Thanks.
Hamilton did it as a joint meeting, so they took a vote. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think both boards took a vote last night.
Yes.
Yeah. So since this isn't a joint meeting, Board of Health can take that up, and then we could agenda that item on for next Tuesday.
When are the Hamilton things that they're doing, when do they go into effect?
Thursday at noon.
This Thursday?
Yes.
Okay. So there'll be signage or something? I'm thinking about Wenham people sort of wandering into Hamilton as they often do.
So can I make one clarifying add to what Dr. King brought up too, which is that our playground, our jungle gym equipment and swings have already had signage saying these are closed, we're not going to be using them at this point. So that signage has already been out, and we've also added signs at all of our fields about social distancing and the importance of that. So I want to clarify that last night Hamilton's actions added, closing the field on top of closing the play structures, and that they would take more effective action at walking the course and such. Mm-hmm. And then they also had the Board of Health vote to address a fine structure for folks violating those items. So there is a little bit of a nuance there, but we do already have signage on our jungle gym and playground equipment that those items are closed to the public at this time.
And I guess I don't know the status of like the iron rail fields and other fields that are in Wenham, West Wenham Playground. Are those all, are the iron rail fields closed to the public?
We did not close the field when the town did not close the field when the play structures were addressed. Hamilton did address the field last night, but Wenham has not done anything to address the fields yet. And I know I did hear some concerns from the iron rail fields are managed by the Youth Soccer Association, and they would actually be breaking a provision of their lease if they did not keep the fields open to the public. So we're working with them on some signage in regards to littering and trash, because that's the major issue there. But we haven't, at least from the last time I spoke with the police chief, we haven't seen the types of complaints at our fields and at our parks and playgrounds that Hamilton has seen. So it hasn't been as bad, but that's why the Board of Health is going to take it up for discussion tomorrow so that we can address it before it becomes an issue.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Ching. Thank you, Mary Beth. Actually, why don't you stay on, because the next agenda item is related to you as well. It's got to do with the desirability of doing a reverse 911 call, obviously to inform the public about COVID-19 cases or not. So that's the question. Anthony had a strong opinion on this. You want to verbalize that, Anthony?
So we had already done 2 reverse 911 calls, and we were going to do another one last week, and there was some concern. This was when we got our first positive test, and there were some concerns that we heard about sending that 911 call, and if it would actually just put more fear into the residents. So at that point, we just we didn't do it, and we thought that it would be best to bring it up here to just have some discussions about what the desire is on frequency, if we once a week, or just not use it, or just looking for some direction.
So, Mary Beth and Dr. Ting, do you have an opinion on that?
I definitely have an opinion. I think the use of the reverse 911, and again, this is opinion, so we all have to come to consensus on what we think is best for the town. But in my opinion, I don't see the reverse 911 used to update the community on numbers. I don't think that's meaningful. It might be meaningful to some people. I think that's around either causing more anxiety or having people respond out of their anxiety to get numbers. I do think the use of the reverse 911 would be important to notify residents if there's something we are asking them to do differently. So if we were going to make some sort of decision about closing access to certain fields or parks, or if there were new testing made available that was local, or if there was a new treatment, or down the road, if there are things that the public needs to do differently, then I think that the reverse 911 call offers a communication style that can reach members of the community who are not accessing us through the Board of Health page or through the town website. They may not have technology. I did hear, I've been concerned because I heard personally from one member of the community who was a senior citizen who didn't have technology at home and said, how am I going to know what's going on if I can't look online? And almost all of our communication, it said, check the town website for updates, check the town website for the latest information. And so I do feel strongly that that's a way to communicate with those who don't have that access. But I think it needs to be a judicious use. I think if we use it too often, people will tune the messages out. And I think it really should be used for if there's something that we are wanting from the community members, a change in how they're behaving, that we need to communicate with them.
Well, that one person that you referred to, does this person get the Morning Globe? There's a lot of information there every day. It's full of COVID-19. There's nothing else in there, no sports section anymore. So that there's a lot going on. Charlie Baker, what he said yesterday was promulgating the day before. So that and you can get that on. Well, you said there was technology challenge, but the Globe still delivers to your door anyway.
Well, if you're lucky, the Tings don't get their newspaper. It comes very irregularly.
Well, and I think, Mary Beth, what I think I heard you say were things that people in Wenham needed to do differently.
Yes.
For instance, if we decided to close fields, that might be an appropriate use to reach everyone to say, if you live in Wenham, please know this field is closed, or whatever that would be. So that's not something you'd get in a newspaper, not any newspaper that covers Wenham to that detail anyway.
Right. And there was a comment from someone who was watching exactly that the Globe may not cover Wenham-specific news, which is a point well taken.
Well, it doesn't. Obviously, it doesn't. And that, but it certainly covers the state. And that some of the statistics they publish in the lower right-hand corner about the new cases and deaths is kind of shocking, actually. I think.
We did also hear from some residents that the press release that we sent out was very disturbing to people. And I recognize that. We had kind of hoped in the language we were using, we had proposed to use for the reverse 911 call to provide a little bit of comfort that we were not taken by surprise with the case, that we're expecting cases, we're expecting more cases, that we're prepared to handle them and respond to residential needs. I lost my train of thought, sorry.
I don't mean to be blunt about this, but the whole thing is disturbing. So there's clearly a sensitivity that's required here. But to think that we should just not tell anybody, and this isn't directed at anyone in particular, just my little bit of soapboxing. If we just choose to say, well, they'll read it somewhere else, we don't have to say anything to them, it is disturbing. And I think that there are a few people that I've spoken to that live in Wenham that don't realize how actually, maybe not disturbed is the right word, or how aware they actually should be. So there is a balance with giving people truthful information that portrays the severity of the problem and the situation that we're in. But to your point, certainly, Mary Beth, not shocking them or scaring them, and I actually personally thought that press release was pretty balanced, but obviously I have a higher tolerance for, factual, straight information. So that would
well, unfortunately, there's nothing about a global pandemic that is not upsetting.
Exactly.
So.
Good point. Good point.
Right. Yeah. So I don't think we can necessarily think we can hide that from the town of Wenham. And so, but I do agree with you about the reverse 911 that probably judiciously used for times when we need for people to do something different. I agree, Mary Beth, that feels like the right use of that. I don't know how anyone else feels.
Well, I'll support Mary Beth's comment because having been in Beverly for many years with my business, they have abused it and used it for every bake sale and so on and so forth. And I got to tell you, even the mayor currently has overused it himself, in my opinion, because he puts out one call and then he puts out another call a couple of hours later, and then he puts out a third call a few hours later. People will start to ignore it.
So I guess we should simply stay tuned and on a case-by-case basis, depending on what the news is, consider future 911 reverse calls or not, depending upon the circumstances. Is that basically what I'm getting from Mary Beth and other people? Hello?
Yes, yes.
So how is that, I guess I'm going to be picky here, but how is that decision made? So if the Board of Health or our public health nurse decide that something needs to be closed and there should be a reverse 911, do they do that, or do they wait for us to have another meeting? Do we have to approve that? I'm not clear on how that process works. I think that, I don't know.
I think given this,
Go ahead, Doctor.
yeah, I think that the local Board of Health is, during this time period, has given a fair amount of room to make those decisions, and I guess we would then present it to the town administrator. But again, we would obviously do it with some discussion with the women. But I think that, and because there's been some new regulations put forth in terms of, because of the pandemic, of what the Board of Health can do if it's deemed to be in the best interest of the public safety and health, that we could do so, I think, by ourselves.
I think you are the experts, and should be able to make that judgment. Certainly, we'd like to stay in the loop, but
Yeah.
I have no problem with that.
I will say that I tend to function collaboratively. I don't like to ever roll out a big statement, and I would not feel comfortable rolling out a public statement like a reverse 911 without having a variety of people proof it and look at it. So I would be very comfortable sharing text with you to say, is there anything that you find particularly inappropriate in the statement? But bottom line, if I would also say, if I felt very strongly that a certain part of the wording needed to be such, I would communicate that to the board and to the town administrator.
My only concern with it is, time. So if you had a timely message and you were waiting for there was a time period lapse between two meetings, I'm happy to hear that you wouldn't necessarily have to wait. Okay.
Although, just speaking for myself, I did see a draft of a reverse 911 call last week, and I asked for the script, and I did see the script was deficient in a couple of areas. One, if I was the recipient of that call, I'd like to know where the person lives so I could stay away from that house or that street. And I understand that, America. I'm saying that it didn't say that, though. It didn't say, that the script didn't say, by the way, this is privileged information or confidential information. We're not allowed to give out the name or the street address of the person. This is a one-person thing. And so I thought that was very important to include in there. I was asked, at that time, it was a draft and it never went out. So I think seeing the script in advance before I went out would be an important thing, I think, as a member of the Board of Selectmen, I would like to see. Okay, I guess we've exhausted that one. But thank you very much for your comments on that. We're still on D. I think we're on D3, making meandering progress here. Discussion and potential approval of deficit spending. Anthony, you still there? Where's Anthony? There you are.
Sorry, I had myself on mute.
Well, you got to join us. This is your agenda item.
Yes. So I asked Chris, our interim finance director, to look into what the governor has allowed municipalities to do during this crisis, is to deficit spend, similar to snow and ice. And so I asked Chris to look into it and attach an email memorandum, and Chris is on. He was on. Chris, you on?
I'm here.
All right. So, Chris, do you want to just go over that, sit with the board, fill them in, explain?
Yeah, basically, I would say it was, I was in my memo, as I was saying, I was recommending it. It just gives us an extra way to fund these
extra expensive since we're in this state of emergency in response to these coronavirus expenses that we are purchasing for this. So by declaring this and accepting it and getting the approval from the director of accounts, that to do the deficit spending just allows us that whatever we don't get reimbursed through the state or through FEMA or any emergency funding, we'll be able to raise this deficit on our tax recap next year. It just gives us another way to fund these expenses.
And just to add to that, so far, we have, anything that we have spent, we have submitted for reimbursement, and we did get $12,000 back. And since the president declared Massachusetts an emergency situation over the weekend, that allows for up to 75% back from FEMA. So we're not spending right now anything excessive, really, and what we did need to spend, we have gotten reimbursed. This just allows, in the event that this gets to be a larger issue and it affects us more so maybe with public safety, and we now had to maybe do some more overtime for police or fire, then this would allow us to do that.
Anthony, what does the approval process look like in a situation like this?
So, like I said, the first group that we submitted for through the Board of Health, I believe that we got reimbursed for. Jackie, correct me if I'm wrong on that. But from what they're telling me, they realize that this is a pretty big global issue, and that they told us that they're going to be reimbursing us rather quickly. We haven't gotten any guidance, any forms, or how that's going to happen. They just tell us it's going to happen quickly.
No, you missed my question altogether. The approval process for buying or spending money, who makes that decision? We need X, and somebody has to say it's okay to spend it. Who's seeing that? The finance committee?
We would go by our policy and procedure. So with anything up to $10,000 is town administrator, and anything over $10,000. We haven't had anything over $10,000. That would be a big major purchase.
Okay. Got it.
So I do have a comment. I think that's good news. Obviously, if we hopefully we won't need it, but if we do, like the snow and ice, I just want to remind people that all we're doing is putting the expenditure off to the following year. We already have a high tax rate, and it'll just go higher. So it's not a free lunch here. It's just we're just postponing something from one fiscal year to the next. So hopefully we won't need to actually take advantage of that. But it's nice to know that it's there for an emergency.
Is there anything that we need to do in order to have this capability, or do we automatically, because of the state of emergency, have the ability to deficit spend? Or do we need to?
I believe what you'll need to do is once you approve it, we need to put it in writing to the director of accounts at the DSL with the approval from the Board of Selectmen, and then he will. With that written asking from us, once he approves, and then he'll give us the written approval back to do the deficit spending.
So is that something that we have to do now, I guess is what I'm asking? At this point, do we have to, in anticipation?
Yeah, just by vote of the Board of Selectmen, then we can send out letter off to Division of Local Services.
Okay.
So what we're doing right now, we're just paying these expenses out of the department's expense account, and once we get approval from the director of accounts to deficit spend, I can create a separate COVID-19 expense and move all those expenses into the one COVID-19 expense account to track them all there.
So you need a motion from us, or an action from us, is that correct?
Yes, and then there'll be a letter put together that you guys would sign off on to send off to the director of accounts.
So Anthony, that brings up a question. Usually after all of our Board of Selectmen meetings, there's a packet of documents that need to be signed and is passed around, and we sign them. And now that we're meeting virtually, that's not obviously going to happen. So what is the procedure for calling us into town meeting to sign the various documents, including the warrants, that you're going to need signed continuously? Hello?
Yeah.
Oh.
You're not showing up on the visual here. I presume you're there someplace.
I haven't, but it looks like his screen is frozen.
Anthony's having technical difficulties. Okay. All right, we'll pass on that one.
That's a
for another
good
day.
question, though.
Yeah.
And to your point, Jack, we have 2 appointments just from tonight, so.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I think Anthony's back.
Oh, you're back, Anthony.
Am I back now?
Yeah, did you hear my question?
Yeah, I could hear you, but it did kind of freeze. So it's a great point, and it's something that we've been asking about, and we haven't gotten anything concrete on that, but I suppose the board could authorize me to sign on their behalf right now, even with those appointments that you did earlier.
I prefer you just call. And say, we'll meet you in the parking lot.
Yeah, we can do that too.
Through my window, and that you can stand 10 feet away from me. I'll sign it and give it back to you. So I don't know how the other 2 selectmen feel about that.
Yeah, that's fine. It's fine with me.
John's got his truck there, and Catherine doesn't live, and she lives closer to town than Hall than I do. I don't think we should change the written approval process, but nevertheless, I think that I think you need to facilitate some signing process that takes the place of us signing after town.
So we could always leave it in the selectmen's hearing room, and you could come in and do that as well. That would work.
Sorry, but how about on the counter? I'm trying not to come into town hall. And you probably don't want people into town hall. Can you just leave them on the outside, tell us, and leave them on the outside counter? Not, the...
Are you talking about the bathroom?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Sure, we could, wherever you'd like.
That'd be great.
Just let us know. All righty, I think that we're on to number D4, update. I guess it's you again, Anthony, unless somebody had further, I guess not.
I'm sorry, I'm interrupting again, but I think we said that there was an action that was needed for D3. Is that something that we can address next week, or do we need to do that now?
You could do it now. You could do it next week, whatever the board's pleasure.
I just asked because I didn't know if there was any timeliness to it.
Is there, Anthony?
No, you can do it next week.
Okay.
Well, you can also put that piece of paper on the counter that Catherine's talking about as well, right?
Well, you have to take a motion, so if you...
Okay, well, let me make the motion now. Okay, I moved, this is mine, I guess, I moved that we approve the deficit spending description and provision that Anthony and Chris Holak has described to us a few moments ago. Well, here a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Catherine, yes.
John?
Yes.
Jack Wilhelm, yes. It's okay. Now you got the approval, and I just put the piece of paper on the railing that Catherine described, or someplace.
We'll let you know when it's ready.
Sure. All right, update on video conference for other board and committees. That's you, Anthony.
Yes, Jackie's been coordinating that with, she's our Zoom expert, so I'll let Jackie talk about how it's gone. And, I think at this point, originally it was recommended for non-essential or all non-essential meetings be held off, where I think that this is going to go on for some time, and we're getting a little better using Zoom technology that I think we could open it up to committees to continue to conduct business. So Jackie can just give an update on how it's worked so far with some of the other boards.
Thank you. Jackie Bresnahan, Director of Administrative Services. We've had several successful Zoom meetings. All of our land use boards, including conservation, planning, and zoning, have all now had virtual Zoom meetings. The Board of Health has had one. I know the selectmen, we all met, we set you guys up on Friday morning for executive session, and that seemed to go well as well, technically with the IT. So I think we're in a place where, given the governor's order today, extending the workplace closures and the stay-at-home advisory until May 4th, we do have some boards and committees that are looking to start working on business again. For example, the Historic District Commission does have an open case that they'd like to address, and there are other boards and committees that have some business that could be done virtually. So I'm just looking for some consensus from the board to allow us to, you know, Nikki obviously has always scheduled our boards and committees so that they could each be in different rooms, and Diane Bucco, our town clerk, has done the postings. But I'm looking for some consensus from the board to allow some additional boards and committees to meet via Zoom and to utilize the technology. I think the meeting, you know, it's obviously something we're getting used to. It's something new. I want to thank Bill Melville for working with us, you know, to make sure that HWCAM is recording, especially on Board of Selectmen meetings. But I'm hoping that the board will give us some consensus as to moving forward with non-essential board and committee business so that we can allow projects and other initiatives to go forward virtually. And we still continue to schedule through the town administrator's office because we can't have more than one Zoom meeting at a time, but it would at least allow folks to continue doing the business of the town in a way that's safe for our residents and our staff and any of our invited guests.
Sounds like a good idea to me. John? John?
Yeah, I would go along with it very much so, but Jackie, I'm cautioning you. I've heard numerous news reports where there's some pretty serious hacking going on with Zoom, and I don't know much beyond that, so I'm just giving you a heads up to find out maybe is there something we need to be protecting ourselves from.
Yeah, it's in the Wall Street Journal today, by the way.
Yeah, it's called Zoom bombing, that somebody jumps in and will put something inappropriate or say something. It's happened in colleges right now.
Churches?
Oh, is it true? I haven't heard churches, but yeah, so, you know, it's something that we'll have to monitor. I haven't heard from any municipalities, anybody jumping the board, but it is listed on our agenda. Somebody could jump on right now. It's just something we have to monitor.
Well, they'd have to know the meeting. They'd have to know the meeting ID number, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but it's posted on the agenda because they're public meetings.
Oh.
It is something, you know, we have...
Catherine, time out. Catherine, do you have an opinion?
I think that we should, I do have a concern, but it's, I think, manageable with Zoom. I completely agree that we should do whatever meetings we need to virtually. The only concern I would have is to be sure that if it's a public hearing, that we're really comfortable with the fact that we can hear the public and the public has access. That's all. But yeah, definitely.
So, Catherine, to that point, we have requested continuances from our land use boards that are currently in public hearing so that we can be sure we're managing that appropriately. I think a majority of the board and committee meetings we're looking to add on to the schedule do not include public hearing factors. They may have open items that have deadlines, whether they be legal or just, you know, trying to do business in a timely way. But we have received from all of our open land use cases the continuances we need, and I believe Margaret Hoffman is here if the board had more detailed questions that they wanted Margaret to address on behalf of land use.
I don't.
I'm good with that. And I guess, Margaret, is that true? There have been, I assume it's true. Why would I question Jackie? So no. You're comfortable with the land use hearings?
Well, as you're probably aware, one of the big cases is the Maple Woods case before the ZBA right now.
Right.
And we have gotten an agreement to continue that. The hearing was scheduled for last week, and it was continued to May 28th.
Okay.
Whether that's going to give us enough time, Town Council's advised us really not to have any of the larger public hearings via Zoom. It could pose a problem for the public to attend. So once May comes, we'll probably have a much better idea of how to proceed at that point. But we have gotten a continuance agreement from them. And there are no other large public hearings in process right now, other than a subdivision for the planning board for 60 Arbor Street, and they've agreed to a continuance until May. So
Okay.
I guess we'll just wait and see what happens in May, and if
Yeah.
necessary, we'll continue on.
Okay.
Let's move on
I'm
to
all set. I'm all set. Don't worry.
Sounds like a good idea. To run with it.
Yeah.
So next we have an update on Town Hall continuity of operations plan. That would be you again, Anthony. You're in your money tonight.
So in your packet is a report that our department heads have put together, just to let the community know how we're conducting business. I know that, you know, it certainly is an inconvenience when your town hall is closed to the public. You know, but in light of what's going on, it's something that had to happen. And then when the governor puts more stricter restrictions, we wanted to make sure that staff wasn't all in the building, so we wouldn't all potentially be exposed. So we've been working, some have been working remotely. I'm in the building still every day. And some are working remotely from home, doing a hybrid. The assessor's office is still coming in at different points of time. The accounting, the finance office has come in, the town clerk has been in, the permitting office has been in. So there's a hybrid going on right now, but there's an extensive report to let everybody know that we're still here, we're still working, we're still supporting the town, and trying to do our best under these unprecedented conditions that we're all faced with.
Questions by the other members of the board, starting with Catherine.
No, I have no questions. It was a pretty comprehensive report. I do want to thank everyone for the extra effort to, you know, it sounds sort of nice to say, oh, I could just work at home in my pajamas. But it totally isn't. There's a lot of work that it takes to have the capability and capacity, especially when you're not really, town hall isn't designed to work that way. So just a thank you for everyone's efforts on the staff, and of course public safety, everyone's efforts to keep things moving.
John?
I'm all set, and my gratitude to everybody for working very hard to try to do the workarounds that all of us are struggling with to some degree, and we've succeeded so far tonight to not be too bad a transmission. So, thank you.
Well, this is not the gong show. I just heard a gong in the background. And so
It's my old clock.
I don't think the meeting is over quite yet, but maybe that was a signal we should move on. So that I am concerned, however, that I did read the report. It's a good report, Anthony. Thank you. Some of them much more comprehensive than others, and that there's some concern not to be discussed tonight, but at some point, if this goes into mid-May, late May, or any time in May and June, that obviously the people can't be as productive as they would be with nobody coming into town hall from the public, asking questions, asking for forms and so forth. That is there an opportunity to have, you know, cost savings for work that's really not being performed because it's not needed to be performed because the public's not asking for it. So that's for a discussion another day. But the longer this goes on, that I think the taxpayers are looking for us and the town is looking for us to save money where we can, in light of the fact that a lot of other people are reducing their staffs with a reduced workload. But nevertheless, I thought it was a good report. Again, some of these are far more comprehensive than others, and that I think we'll have to have a further discussion on this, not necessarily next week, but as this problem continues. So now 6 and 7, we have the last two items on the agenda: annual town meeting, annual town election. So that I'll take that myself. And that we had some legal advice from our KP law firm about that. So we don't know when it's going to be. We haven't, the last physical meeting of the board a couple of weeks ago, we postponed both of these to a date uncertain in the future, excuse me, and that we decided that we wouldn't set a date then because we had no clue when the Charlie Baker would say, okay, ollie in free, you can now go back to business as usual. And we still don't today, 2 weeks later, and I don't think we'll have any firm advice or guidance for a while. So that the longer this goes on, however, the more problematic it becomes. And that I've asked Anthony to come up with a plan that basically says that, all right, if Charlie Baker says, I'm making this up, on May 7th, whatever date that happens to be, the business can go back to normal, and there's no more, maybe people still have to socially distance themselves, but whatever. He removes the guidance and all of these promulgations he made about closing this and closing that. So how many days would it take for us to, from that point on, to have a town meeting? What do we have to do in similarly town elections? And I know Diane Bucco is asking us to give her some guidance on that as well for ballot questions, which just came in on email today. So the answer is that we don't know, and that I think it's very premature for us to set dates that we're only going to have to hold our breath and decide, oopsie daisy, we can't make that date either. It certainly doesn't look like it's going to be any time in April because the governor's closed us down, so it's Trump, the whole month of April. So we're talking about May now, and that unless we get some guidance by mid-April or late April, it's going to be it's going to be in the future. So we don't know. And as I said, that I don't think that's in the top of everyone's mind when we're going to have the town meeting. But and I also am very concerned, even when we do have announcement town meeting, we have quorum requirements. And somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's 120 people for the annual town meeting, and there's no quorum for elections, town elections. But you know, we've struggled without this COVID-19 virus last year dramatically. I think we were 35 to 40 minutes late holding the meeting, with people frantically calling their neighbors and friends to come down. So I'm concerned that some people, even if when Charlie Baker says, okay, the rules are off, we're on the downside of the virus, it's not going to be eliminated, and certainly there won't be vaccine that time, there's probably no no medicine for it. I think that we're going to have a huge problem getting the requisite number of people to show up for the annual town meeting to have a meeting. And so we have to keep that in mind as well. So we have lots of problems about coming up with the next town meeting. So I'll turn it over to, I'll start with John. I'll go back and forth with John and Catherine. Hopefully I'm doing this equally.
Thank you. I am concerned about the town meeting, but I'm not as concerned as I am about the voting. And the reason I'm concerned about the voting is there are people who have run for offices, and suppression of vote is a very serious charge. Now, I understand the governor said what he said, but is there some way that we can do, have a vote and send out ballots to be sent in by mail, or some other way of accomplishing that task? The town meeting is going to be very, very difficult at any given time, simply because there are so many moving parts right now that could affect the budget, that this is why I think Anthony's suggestion to put it on the agenda for the foreseeable future, to make sure that we're bringing up to date anything that comes along. But the voting, I've got a lot of concerns about that.
Catherine.
To me, the biggest concern for voting is not the people. We don't have any contested races. I understand there are some people anxious to get on and some people may be anxious to get off, but the bigger question for me are the ballot questions, and there are 4 of them, 2 overrides. So without the information of a town meeting, to just ask people or send people ballots and ask them to, without being able to give them any information, ask them to vote, I think it's premature. And I understand, I don't think that anyone could ever, I don't think, accuse any municipality of trying to, hinder a vote when we're in the middle of a global pandemic and on emergency procedures. So I agree with Jack. I think it's really up in the air, and every day it changes, and there's legislation that is going through both the House and the Senate, and we should just sit tight and wait till we hear a little bit more.
So Jackie, you had your hand up? Jackie?
Well, Diane Bucco's on, and she had some questions about.
Yeah, well,
the
Jackie had her hand up first. Wait a minute.
okay.
Jackie,
Oh,
you
I
had
was
your
just
hand up.
clarifying that there are 5 ballot questions.
5.
Oh, I thought you were waving at me, okay.
Oh, no, sorry.
I remember.
I shouldn't hand gesture, I apologize.
All right, where's Diane? I don't see her on here, though, but where is she? I don't see her. I saw her eating her dinner. I saw her eating her dinner a few minutes ago.
Here.
But,
I'm here.
There she is.
yep. Did you have something to add, Diane? What?
I didn't. I don't know exactly what, but you got too many clickers on. Hold on.
Watching Star Trek?
Sorry. I don't know what you need. The election, you just need to announce 20 days in advance. We have early voting by mail and absentee voting. I'm not worried about any voter suppression or the election day at all. I just don't know how much time in advance you need to announce for the town meeting scheduled date. I will have to get back to you on that.
Well, yeah, there's logistics involved. I'm saying, that that's one reason why we didn't set a date. But I've asked Anthony to work with you to figure out, again, as I said a few minutes ago, when the gun goes off and we have permission to have a town meeting and town elections any day from the following day, how many days do we really need to prepare for it? And so, I'm waiting for
I have that date as 20 days before the election. I don't know if I have it in my head. For some reason, I think 35 for a town meeting. But we have to have it by now. As of right now, we have to have that election by June 30th. So the last day to call the election would be June 10th.
Yeah, but Charlie Baker could override that by some legislation. So we also have issues. We also have issues with we need a warrant hearing as well. So there's other hearings and other processes. We have to have the Boy Scouts deliver the annual warrant book, things like that. So that and obviously Harry Davis reminds me that they're serving food at the town meeting and that we need to give them more than a couple of days advance notice for those chicken salad sandwiches they're going to prepare. Selectman, Catherine.
I think, as I said, I think it's very much up in the air. I've seen some legislation that specifically speaks to the fact that town meetings and their associated budgets may be able to be delayed past June 30th without, there are remedies for that. I actually think I know how hard this is for people to hear, but even in June or May, I think where there are still going to be issues, I might consider this year asking the WVIS to skip the town lunch, that joint communal eating. But
oh God, there goes the quorum again.
I know. Maybe we can do like takeout town lunch. Anyway, that's a long time to worry about that. But I just think there are so many important. I won't say these things are not important, but. So many critical things right now. Let's just focus on that. I agree with you, Jack. I think we're going to get a lot more clarity from the legislature in the next week or so, even, on what they're going to give us, what flexibility they're going to give towns.
Thank you. I agree. John, you have any comments?
No, I'm in a quandrum as well as you guys are. So let's see where the time takes us.
Okay, we've just concluded the agenda for our first totally virtual Board of Selectmen meeting, open session, and that I'll move that the Board of Selectmen adjourn for the evening. It's now 10 after 8 for Catherine Tinsley's records. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye.
Yes, Catherine, yes.
Clemency, aye.
Okay, we're off.